Thank you for coming to this press conference. This will be an extremely short press conference because I wanted in Maine to deal with two issues. The first has to do with the Commission of Inquiry into the plot to assassinate the president and an insidious attack on freedom of the press. So most people in Guyana believe that our government is beleaguered by its own incompetence and that it constantly seeks distraction. And that may be true. And one of the ways they believe that the government has been distracting public attention from the real problems of Guyana is through the establishment of the commissions of inquiry in a never-ending manner, it seems, and on every single thing under the sun. As I said before, I share that view that the COIs, and we have had many of them, have been a distraction from addressing real problems faced by the Guyanese public. But I also believe that these commissions of inquiry are a vehicle for corruption, where people who often are sympathetic to the government are given huge sums of money to do work that may seem important, but in the public scheme of things and given the aspirations of the people are not topical today, but they are just given large sums of money to really waste time. And so our country over the last several weeks have seen what we expected. We expected, given the way, the inept manner, the usual incompetent manner that the government addressed the first prison fire that took 17 lives, that we were going to have a repeat of this incident because they made fire a tool that could be used by prisoners for engagement with the political authority. So I've spoken about this already. We had the second fire, and this one was even more disastrous in terms of loss of property, but less so in terms of loss of life. And then the government prevaricated again. And it created the veneer that it was busy at work addressing the situation, but by its own act, it created another moral hazard, which is by early release of prisoners, some prisoners, they created a ton of dissatisfaction in the prisons and made disruption of prison life very lucrative once again, because many prisoners now believe that the moment they act in an unruly fashion and create ruckus or confusion at the prisons, that once again the government is going to blame everything on overcrowding and release some more prisoners. So we have had these two events caused largely because of the incompetence of the government, not because of PPP legacy, as they are seeking to make out. Then we've had these explanations, and that the prisoners were secured wherever they were placing them, in the pastures, etc. Everyone knew that there were attempts by the prisoners to break out again from the pasture in which they were put. The security forces were told about this, and the minister himself knew about this. Yet the very same thing happened. And this time, it's even worse than when the fire took place. Even more hardened criminals and the prisoners escaped. Yesterday we met in Parliament. And one would have thought, given this crisis in the country, that the minister would have addressed the Parliament through a statement explaining what took place in broad terms, because he owes it to the people of this country, and then assuring the nation that there were practical measures put in place to recapture the prisoners and to secure the prisoners, and that they can rest assured that they will be safe in their homes. He sat through the Parliament, slept through part of it, as is in the usual fashion, as though none of this ever happened in our country. The entire prison was practically burnt down. A prison that's been there for over 100 years. We made BBC, I heard. That's one of the few things now we make the international news on. It's about negative things. And yet, nothing from the government. We now have to use our time. We are trying to get the 3rd of August for the debate on a private member's day, a motion about the prisons, so that the people of the country will get explanations from this government, being forced by the PPP through a motion to have this debate. I'm hoping that the Speaker would still allow us to have the debate on the 3rd of August. And so we are in the middle of this at this point in time, in the middle of this crisis at the national level. Yet this government has seen it fit at this point in time, when you have a number of prisoners who've escaped, when the safety and security of the prisons are in question, to launch a commission of inquiry into a plot to assassinate the president. Now, this is a feature that you often find in countries that are run by tin pot despots or tin pot dictators, another word for despot, where they're so concerned about their safety all the time that they have to create this aura and this suspicion that their lives are so valuable that they need to launch these major COIs. And in this case, they launched this COI. Now, they placed in charge of the COI a relatively junior policeman when he retired, who was a member of an activist of the coalition when they were campaigning in the 2015 elections. So that's how much we will learn of his impartiality, how impartial he would be. He was a hardcore activist of the coalition. to look into, almost question the entire leadership of the police force about how they acted in this matter. Now, if the concern that there was not an adequate investigation into the matter and that it was not treated seriously, all the president had to do was to get the head of the presidential secretariat to call in the people to the office and say, we are not satisfied that, and I would like to see a report, comprehensive report on my desk within 2 weeks. And that would have had the matter addressed comprehensively, seriously, allayed all the fears, and we would not have had to spend millions of dollars on it. But they opted for a public inquiry into an assassination plot on the president, or a so-called assassination plot, at the time when we are facing the most serious threat to law and order in our country ever. And what they're doing in this public process is going to destroy the entire morale of the police force. The same people who will have to now go out and apprehend these prisoners. So, the crime chief has been called there, head of major crime units, the assistant commissioner, inspectors, deputy head of CID, sergeants, corporals, the acting commissioner of police today is there. The commissioner of police will go there. This is the priority at this time, when these people should be busy planning the recapture of the prisoners. But now they have to go there and be disparaged by a Mr. Slow, and the entire morale and subject often public humiliation at a time when our country needs them elsewhere. And for a matter that is, frankly speaking, trivial and could have been solved differently. This is how we are approaching this country's security. As though some comment by someone who said that someone may have paid him or wanted him to assassinate the president is more important than the safety of this entire country. It is pure. I can't understand it. I don't want to say the word that I'm thinking that comes to my head. But this is how callous our government is in this matter. They are destroying the morale of the police force in a partisan act. And people said to me, and there is a suspicion, that this is a deliberate process. It's the public nature of it, and having a junior officer question people who are far superior to him, and a person who is partisan to heading that COI, has implications for who takes over the force in the future. That reputations will be destroyed here. And the public destruction of reputations of good officers would be the basis for which to privately suppress them within the organization. And so it's a charade. It's not necessary at this time. It will destroy the morale of the police force. We have bigger fish to fry at this point in time. And I hope that it will come to an end shortly. Now, yesterday the Prime Minister also tabled or tabled a bill called the Broadcasting Amendment Bill 2017. And we, for the first time in a very long time, the minion lackey prime minister that we have brought something to the parliament to justify his lucrative perks. But if we read the bill carefully, we will see how insidious it is. And if we allow this bill to succeed, it will be the beginning of the end of press freedom in Guyana. And so I will urge people in this country to read the bill carefully, and given what they know of the nature of this government, to examine the bill in that light. So there are many egregious sections of this bill, but I wish to draw attention to two of them. The first is that after this bill becomes law, everyone has to reapply for a license. And you may not get a license again. They may refuse you a license. So you could very well end up with lots of people with TV licenses, radio licenses, but take TV licenses that, for example, that could lose their licenses. Now, we had a situation when we got into office too, that there are many people who were squatting on the airwaves, etc. But we grandfathered almost everyone who had been doing this, been broadcasting, because they had accrued rights. So what we have now is a situation where a broadcasting authority that is appointed by this the lackey prime minister will now make a determination as to people who may have been broadcasting for 15 years, 20 years now, whether they will continue, they will get a license to continue to do so or not. So it could lead to a withdrawal of your license to broadcast, and if you continue to do so, you'll go to jail for a year and face a big fine. It is a direct threat to what we have now, the people who are broadcasting at this point in time. And I have no doubts that given how partisan this government is, that they would use political criteria to make that determination. And then the second issue that I wish to bring to your attention in the bill is the part about programs, part 2. It says every broadcasting agency shall broadcast public service programs in the following manner. A, for a total of up to 60 minutes per day. B, between 6 hours and 22 hours. And C, free of cost. Now you would recall that when the coalition government was in charge of the parliament between 2012 to 2015, they argued that GINA was carrying too many government programs and that ministers doing their work was propaganda. GINA show. And they cut the GINA budget to zero. Now the GINA budget is bigger than it was before. GINA and DPI and their spending on the state machinery. But at that time, a government minister going to visit a project or talking about was propaganda. And it could not be broadcast on the state-owned television. Now, television stations and radio stations are required, private ones, to now give 1 hour per day for free, every television station, every radio station, to the government to broadcast those programs. And they stop being propaganda anymore, and they're going to be now public service programs. So this is an expropriation of property and the time that private stations have, that the state under the PPP never sought to impose. There are many TV stations that were openly hostile that even refused, like Channel 9. The ones that refused to even give us programs that slots that we were willing to pay for. And they had no punitive measure taken against them. Now, under this law, the government would expropriate from you, from all the broadcasters, all of them, TV and radio, 1 hour of time per day. Now, it says, let me give you what the definition in the bill is of a public service broadcast. A public service broadcast means the broadcast of a program produced for the purpose of informing and educating the public and promoting policies and activities of the government that benefit the public as a whole. So now when Nagamutu or Ramjatan or Holder or the president goes on TV to lie about the situation in relation to Gaisuko and the finances of Gaisuko, it becomes a public service broadcast. And every television station and every radio station has to carry this if they send it over. And if you send it over, they send it over. So now Imran Khan will now have, and the Jaundice agency that he runs, will now have 1 hour free time on every television station and radio station in this country to spew government propaganda. And so if they send something that the broadcasters believe is partisan, they have 24 hours to complain to the broadcast. That's the broadcasting agency will complain to the authority. And the authority will rule that it is public service broadcast, or if it rules that it is not public service broadcast, then it will say they'll have to pay for it. So it doesn't say you can't carry it, you just have to pay for it. So automatically the government gets your time, whether it is a public service broadcast or not, for free, or they can pay for it. You don't have any control over that anymore. This is the beginning of government propaganda getting expropriation, first of all, the public airwaves, getting government propaganda to all parts of this country for free. Government, as opposed to state. That this Abdu will get its lies broadcasted for free. And this is basically what just two elements of this bill that we'll have to oppose. And I want to say to their broadcasting agencies that the first thing if the government gets its way with this bill, because it uses its one-seat majority to do so, the first thing they should do is to file a legal challenge to it. Because this will not stand anywhere. It's tantamount to expropriation, and also there may be of property in both the sense of the powers that it confers on the authority to take away people's licenses, and secondly to expropriate the time that they have on television. So these are two matters that I thought I'd bring to your attention at this press conference, that we have a COI at this point in time that is a waste of our money and demoralizing the police force. You are demoralizing the people who have to go out and capture these escapees. And secondly, you have a bill that will come up that will change the media landscape in Guyana in an unbelievable way, all towards greater government control. I saw Jordan said that the economy is still readjusting, so I wouldn't comment on that. But I can bet, I can wager you that it will be readjusting for the whole tenure of this government. Thank you.
Mr. Jagdeo, so one question for you, Roy and James. You're saying you do not support the COI into the assassination plan?
I think it's a waste of money. If the concern was that a thorough investigation was not done, all they had to do was to name a new team, call the commissioner of police and say, I'm not satisfied, I want a proper investigation done. Why this charade? If it is not to humiliate the people or a more sinister plan to affect their further promotion, and is this the priority at this time?
Mr. Jagdeo, have you been able to finalize the purchase for
No, I made substantial progress on it. Hopefully by next week I'll be able to submit the list.
Did you get to meet with President Granger before finalizing that list?
No, I did not.
So as the first start news, a few weeks ago, Mr. Jagdeo, I asked you about meeting the President and the issue of some substantive Chancellor and Chief Justice. Could you update us on whether or not that process is moving on?
It has to be initiated by the President, and I have not had any word from him.
But aren't you at all concerned that months have passed and you're not hearing anything on the matter?
The thing is that there are lots of things I'm not hearing from the President on. I'm concerned about all of them. All of them.
And going back to Tracy's question on the list, how soon can you see that being finalized?
That's next week.
Next week.
I hope, yes. I'm not going to say that, but I've made substantial progress from the last time. And so by next week.
Given the fact that there was a ruling in a case that involved this very issue, would it be fair to say that you plan to await that written ruling before you decide what exactly you're going to do?
I'm still waiting for the written judgment to be given, and that will determine the course of action. But I had committed to submitting a third list, publicly and with the President. And I believe that I should continue with that process. Clearly, we'll have to discuss at some point in time the profound nature of the ruling. But I'm hoping that from this third list that someone would be chosen and then it would become a moot issue.
So what if nobody's chosen? What happens then?
We had identified a process that should have started already, but there's been no attempt on the part of the government to trigger that process, because the work was supposed to be done simultaneously on discussing ways forward that should the current list, or the current set of names, not the current list, but the current set of names, not meet the favor of the president.
Just one final question. There were two lists that were submitted before, and persons would have given their green light to have their names placed on that list. With the compilation of this third list, are you getting any difficulties getting people to accept nominations?
I've said this before, yeah, and the answer is yes. Again, yes, because good, solid professionals, people who don't want to be in the public and political domain, don't want their names to become political football. They're very reticent about having their names go up. And then at some in the public that people are told that they don't meet standards of impartiality or independence, or they don't have the skills to manage what is essentially a technical job, not a political job.
Mr. Jagdeo, on the broadcasting bill, entities will have to reapply for their license. Why would this be difficult if they got the license initially? Did the requirements to get the license change? Because if they reapply, wouldn't they still have those things in place to get the license?
Well, it is not the reapplying that is the problem. It is conferring on the authority to the right to refuse people who have had licenses that may have dated back to 15, 20 years now. It is there, so they have acquired property rights in this country now on the by being there for such a long time, having a license, being compliant with the current regulations. And then if you change that totally and you deny them a license, then you're seizing their property. It's expropriation. And that is the concern.
So, my name is again Chronicle. Coming back to the issue of COIs, are you saying that all the COIs were a waste of time and a thorough investigation could have been done instead of spending millions of dollars?
I'm saying that this government has a fondness for COIs. And so we have had too many at great cost and expense to the taxpayers. The one for Gaisuku is over $70 million spent on it. And then at the end of it, when the president was asked about it guiding his government's policy in relation to closure of estates, which the COI did not recommend, the one in Gaisuku, he said, it's not gospel. Then what did you need the COI for? What did you need it? Just to, I think it's a show in the face of no policy or clear policies to take the country forward, in the face of severe incompetence, it is one way of creating the impression to the public that they are seriously addressing matters and that they are doing something. And this will not solve anything. And even the approach to the COIs, look at the one with land issues. The National Two-House Council warned the president not to move ahead with it when he announced his intentions. The 4 NGOs were opposed to it, the Amerindian NGOs. We were. People said there was no consultation. He still went ahead. And then we heard when there was a big public uproar, it became a political issue. Then he said, I'm going to adjust the terms of reference slightly. At the end of the day, even if you have one for African ancestral lands and a separate COI, which we will not oppose, how will that solve the issue for jobs, say, in those same villages? Say, Buxton, you have a COI and communal land. You have a COI and communal lands. What about the young people in Buxton? What are you going to do to get them a job now? The COI may go and dig up historical records about who owned these lands 50 years, 100 years from back. What difference will it make to the lives of young people who live in that village now? It is not solving any problem. They said that the COI was responsible for the math results that we had. That some COI was responsible in education for the better math results. What about next year if we do worse than this year? Would the COI, they say the COI covers that too? It is just excuses for doing real hard work and tackling serious issues and doing the heavy lifting that you need to do at the policy level to move this country forward.
Mr. Jagdeo, did you get the cost for the various COIs?
We have now, we're asking a question in Parliament because we've had varying costs for the same COI. I think they're sterilizing some of the costs. So, you know, they just, like, they spend large sums of money on an activity, but you don't see it in the final numbers, but an activity associated with the COI. So if they give misleading information in the Parliament, we can then take steps to go to Committee of Privileges.
This question will be asked on August 3rd.
Yeah, yes, we intend to ask about these issues. Okay. Thank you very much.